Hey math kids, today we're going to talk about the unit circle and just kind of where things are on the unit circle and how to reason through the unit circle without having one in front of you. Because when you take the IB test, you're not going to have the unit circle to look at. You have to kind of know how to generate it yourself. So I'm just going to talk to you about what I do. So I first draw a circle. Go like this. And then the first, you want to know that this is 0 or 2 pi. So if you're starting here, the angle is 0. If you go all the way around, it's 2 pi. This first part is pi halves. This is just pi. This is 3 pi halves. And then back to 2 pi. Okay, so you need to memorize that. Now, I suggest that you memorize the first quadrant because we start here when we rotate and go around, and typically there are 3, I always call them tick marks, but you can call them whatever. This spot right here is the square root of 3 halves, comma, 1/2. And I'll explain how I remember those in just a second. Right here, it's the square root of 2 over 2, square root of 2 over 2. And right here, it's just the inverse of this, so it's 1/2 square root of 3 halves. Okay, now the angle measurements, so if we measure from here to here, it's pi 6th. If we measure from here to here, so from the beginning to this line, it gives us pi 4ths. Then if we measure from the beginning to this line, we get pi 3rds. And then if we measure from here to here, we get the pi halves that we have written there. And so that's what that means. If we measure from the beginning to the halfway point, it's pi, etc. Okay, so we have these values. Now, how do I remember that this one goes here and this one goes here? Because it's easy to get those confused. Now, I just kind of go off the visuals. If I was to drop this down here, and if I was to drop this over here, okay. If I was to drop that, sorry, I'm having a tech issue with my drawing pad. Okay, if I drop this down here, or if I drop this over here, it's a lot more realistic. This is at the halfway point, so my y value should be 1/2. And so that's how I remember that. Because if I look at this, that's not even close to the halfway point. So it is kind of like a visual, trusting a diagram thing, but I think it's okay. We can do the same thing here. If I drop this down and this, we see that this is much less likely to be 1/2, and this right here, the x value, is much more likely to be 1/2, and so the x value should be 1/2. Now from there, if you get all this memorized, now I highly suggest memorizing everything that's on the screen right now, and it does take some time, but as you're doing problems, try not to rely on looking at by looking at one that's already filled out. Try to fill it out every time from memory, and then double check it with one that's already filled out. And if you do that, if you take the time to try to do it every single problem, you'll memorize it without just sitting down and memorizing it. Now, once you have all this stuff memorized, the nice thing is, if we want to know the 3 tick marks over here, all we have to do is reflect it across here. Now, if we reflect from here to here, only the x value is going to change, and it's just going to be negative from this point. So it's going to be negative 1/2 and square root of 3 halves. So the y value is still positive because we're still in the positive y section. This one we reflect across. Once again, we just change the x value, keep the y value. Reflect across, change the x value, keep the y value for this point, and so on. And then we can do the same thing here. Once again, both are going to be negative, x and y are both going to be negative. This one's symmetric with that, so we get negative square root of 3 halves, negative 1/2, and so on. And I just keep going around. So negative square root of 2 over 2, negative square root of 2 over 2, and then negative square root of 3 halves, negative 1/2. This one, we can choose to be symmetric with this, or we can choose to be symmetric with this. Either way, if we think of it going from here to here, our x value will become positive, but our y value will stay negative. Now, if I wanted to do symmetry this way, my x value will still be positive, but the y will be negative. And so that will be square root of 2 over 2, negative square root of 2 over 2. And then the last one, if it's symmetric about that, it will just be, whoops, I made a mistake. This one right here should have been negative 1/2, comma, negative square root of 3 halves. And when I went over here, it should have been 1/2, negative square root of 3 halves. Alright, sorry about that. And then when I go down, from this one down, I'm going to get square root of 3 halves, and then negative 1/2. Okay, it's always good to double check going both directions. Now, when you're doing problems, you're not going to have to generate this entire thing every single time. There will just be a single piece that you'll need to do that, but you'll learn how to do that in later videos. This is just a prerequisite video. I think it's really good to watch before some of the other unit circle stuff that we'll talk about. If you can get this down, it's really helpful. If you need additional help with this, come to Math Lab. Until then, calculator.